Hello, MCU fans. Today is going to be my Echo Season 1 breakdown, focusing particularly on timeline placement as well as how it fits into this overall street level storyline that's been developing, and in fact, really kicks it into high gear. I cannot wait to see where things go from here. Now, there will be spoilers, so make sure you've seen the episodes first, but assuming you have, let's dive right in and see what we can find out. All right, don't forget, we do have the January contest running all month long. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber and leave a comment. One random winner will be announced on a video in early February and can choose from one of the books or steel books above. Best of luck. And we also have the new membership option in case you want to support the channel in that way, with my goal of hopefully doing this full time one day. But however you support the channel is greatly appreciated. Simply subscribing, leaving comments, liking the video, it all goes a long way. So thank you very much. Okay, so we start by seeing the new Marvel Studios logo. Presumably, we'll see this continue throughout the Spotlight series. I love that look and feel. Kind of reminds me of the Netflix shows, a little gritty, a little darker, very cool. And then we also get the Marvel Spotlight logo itself with a clever little theme song. I'm really excited to see how this works. It's a very cool concept to think that you don't need to have watched much to be able to enjoy this series. And in particular, I think they handled it really well and stuck to that goal because, theoretically, you should have watched 3 seasons of Daredevil and 1 season of Hawkeye before you would watch this show. But they threw in enough flashbacks that you didn't have to do it. They would certainly enhance your viewing, but you didn't need to do it. So I thought they did a really good job. Very interested to see future entries in the Marvel Spotlight category. Okay, so I'm going to go through all the flashbacks in all the episodes in chronological order because, I like the timeline, right? I just think it's easier to process. Now, it does so happen that this first flashback is in the very first episode, but I'm just going to put them all in chronological order as we go through them. So we actually flash back to an unknown time period. I'm betting in the next timeline book it'll be listed as the distant past because, it doesn't really matter when. It was just a long time ago. And this is basically the Marvelized version of the actual origin story that the Choctaw Nation believes. So it's unclear where this is. Like, I've heard different theories of it. They're aliens from another planet. Maybe they were in a pocket dimension. Somehow they ended up on Earth. Let me know your take on it. I don't think it really matters, but it is still interesting. Likewise, what is this? Is this a pool of somehow has power to it? Because it seems that it gave the Choctaw Nation their ability to pass their own powers on to their direct ancestors. Of course, you can't help but notice how it looks a little similar to what we saw in the Kahori episode. Maybe they're somehow tied, the Choctaw Nation to the Mohawk Nation, and this is all tied into one bigger Native American origin story. I mean, this looks very different, but remember they were both in water originally. At this point, I'm showing the portal in the sky, but still, very interesting that we see that tie there. Also, it is kind of cool. The actress that voiced Kahori actually plays the adult Bonnie in this series. No connection between the two characters, but boy, you really have to wonder if they're trying to build something here. Also, the very fact that they worked so closely with the Choctaw Nation, which they say at the end of the season, this real nice thank you to them. Well, it's very similar to how they worked with the Mohawk Nation in the Kahori episode. So anyway, whether they're meant to be tied together or not, I really do appreciate learning about the culture, history, heritage, etc. of both of these Native American nations. Okay, so then back to the flashback, we meet Chafa, who is the first of the Choctaw Nation. And, we see her she comes out of the ground, and then the clay seems to fall off her hands, and then she obviously looks more human. And then we see these symbols that keep appearing on each of the ancestors and ultimately on Echo. Seems how they transfer, again, their powers to later down the ancestral line. And then we see her there as she's fully turned human. So, very cool. Then we jump to 1200 AD. I thought it was interesting they went back to AD because in Eternals they used AD and BC. Then in the timeline book they moved to BCE and CE. And then now here we are back again to ADs. I don't care either way, but I just find it interesting. But this is so funny to me. So they say 1200 AD and then Alabama. Ouch. It's kind of a clever little way to remind Americans like myself that we did not discover America. That's not what Columbus did. He discovered a country that already existed and a culture and a heritage and a people that were already there. So pretty wild. That's just really funny. So this is what Alabama looked like in 1200 AD. And I think that's really cool. You so often think of Native Americans as being in a circle of teepees and just hanging out. this is really neat to think that they might have built these type of structures. So love it, love it. Then actually, I do have to stop and say there are some really good jokes towards Native American stereotypes. First of all, I love that they get this is in a later episode, obviously, but they get this very, very white couple, even in white clothing. And yeah, I have been to some Native American shops. I visited Taos Pueblo in New Mexico, which is awesome. And yeah, they don't really like it when you want ethnically ambiguous schmata, as he says, because sometimes tourists, like myself, I fell into it as well. You want the stuff that looks pretty, and you don't really care whether it actually has a true heritage to it. But nonetheless, I thought that was fun. They kind of picked on them a little bit, and then I loved his chant, "Buy the damn thing, buy the damn thing." That was funny. So yeah, having been at some of these Native American shops, I can tell you they're very nice. They don't treat customers like this. But it is true that as Americans, we sometimes come in with these stereotypes, not realizing it. And so I like shows like this that point it out and say, hey, just learn your heritage a little bit of your country. All right, so we then meet Loak in this 1200 AD flashback in a political game of stickball. I say political because rather than going to war, they would use these games to decide something, in this case, as important as which of them get banished. So literally the winner will get to stay and the losers are gone. So wild, very cool. And then we see how Loak gets, in the middle of the game, a power-up from her ancestors, and that helps her win the game. So very cool. Then we jump to a flashback in the 1800s. The late 1800s in particular, where we meet the Light Horsemen. Indian country was infested with dangerous criminals threatening the safety of the native nations, and along came the Light Horsemen to take care of that. But more importantly, this is another one of the ancestors of Echo, and a direct line back to the very beginning of the Choctaw Nation. And we meet Tuklo. So very cool. She's very excellent marksman. And then there we see the pool again, right? The water, the swirling. Very cool, but I keep wondering, what does it mean? What is it? I wonder if we'll ever get a little bit more on the origin of this and what it's symbolizing. But that gives her power up, and she helps defend her people from the criminals. Then we go to a flashback, which for now I'm just going to say is prior to the 2007 flashback scenes in Hawkeye, which we'll get to in a minute. I'm wondering if these are maybe in 2006, and I'll discuss why in a moment, but they could also be in 2007, basically right before those flashbacks in Hawkeye. But most importantly, we meet Echo's mom, who ends up having a healing power. And poor Echo, a young Echo, obviously very young. In fact, it's really interesting. I wonder if it's the same actress. I'm assuming it is, but it's so wild how she looks the exact same age as she did in the Hawkeye episodes. So I'm wondering how closely to the Hawkeye episodes they filmed these flashbacks. But nonetheless, she shoots a woodpecker, which is a very important symbol. You've seen the woodpecker throughout, off and on, saying I didn't mean to hurt it, like a little kid never wants to admit what they did. But the mother uses her healing powers, and notice her hands are glowing. And she has, again, those circles, the power she got from the ancestors. And then we do learn a little bit more about how the ancestors had an ability to know when they were truly needed, when they needed to pass those powers on to others. And at least in the MCU, that's where Echo is getting her name, ultimately, because the powers echo through you. Very cool. Of course, in the comics, Echo is very different. Echo was more like she could echo the moves of the people she's fighting, which, because that's basically the exact same as Taskmaster, I think it was probably wise that they changed her powers. And then this is kind of cool because it has more of the Native American culture and heritage to it. But nonetheless, definitely a change from the comics. All right, so then we learn in the final episode, but I think this is just important to mention now, all the different skills Maya gets from each ancestor. And notice each episode was named after the person who was in the flashback where we learned about their certain skill set. So Chafa gave her ferocity, Loak gave her strategy, and by the way, the woodpecker, notice that he's hanging out there again. He's just a sign. He's there to let you know when there's danger coming and to warn you, so pretty cool. Episode 3, again, showed us Tuklo, which gave Echo cunning, and episode 4, her mother, Taloa, gave her love. So very cool. Okay. So then, still before the flashbacks in Hawkeye, we see young Echo just before they moved to New York, and we'll see why. And there she is playing shadow puppets, if you will. And again, that actress looks so similar to how the age she's going to be in the actual Hawkeye scenes. But anyway, they head off and get into a bad car wreck. And that's when we learn how Maya's mom died, and we learn how Maya lost her leg I'm not going to go any further down that scene because, woo, that was painful. I don't ever want to have to see that again. Poor Echo. Then, soon after that accident, that's when William and her dad and Maya head to New York. He talks about heading to New York for his job. And then finally, we get the replay of the Hawkeye flashbacks. Now, this is interesting. This is actually from the Hawkeye show itself. But in the Echo show, two differences. I'm sure you'll notice them both right off the bat, right? It's a more muted color scheme, but they also removed the 2007. And it's really interesting because this is the one flashback that should have been in the timeline book that wasn't. And I think it was an accident. But now that they're not even showing the date, I'm like, are they changing the date around? I don't think so. But it was just very interesting. But I love the fact that during all these flashbacks, they actually incorporate some of the deleted scenes, because there was a Hawkeye deleted scene where we see William, her dad, doing his business for the Kingpin. So that's pretty cool. Then we finally get a date. I don't know why they took the 2007 off, but we do get the date of 2008, which is when the scene that was in so many of the trailers occurs, where we find out, do not make the Kingpin upset. Uncle has something he needs to do, and obviously he's taking off to go beat the crap out of that ice cream vendor that made fun of her for being deaf. So I'm not going to show those scenes because I don't want the video to get struck, because those are pretty violent. But it was pretty sweet too. Definitely the Kingpin we've come to expect from the Netflix series. And speaking of the Netflix series, this is the timeline for all the shows that are part of the Netflix series. Now, I am going to do a follow-on video where I go through this in detail and fully integrate it in with the MCU movies, since, hey, it's all canon now, right? But in particular, if we just look at the Daredevil series, it runs from January of 2015 all the way to November of 2017. So obviously we know what happens to Daredevil and Kingpin during that time frame. So then, after this, we jump forward to what I'm pretty sure is 2021, and that's the flashback from Hawkeye, where William Lopez is killed. Obviously, Kingpin put the hit out on him, and she shows up to see his death. And in the timeline book, we just know it's sometime during the blip, which, of course, we already knew that already, right? Because that's when Ronan was doing his rampage. But notice that they just give a big range, and at the bottom, they say that's when William Lopez was killed. Now, the wiki, and I agree with it, has guessed it's around 2021 because in the Hawkeye series, Hawkeye's telling Kazi, hey, you've been working under William Lopez as the lieutenant for what, 4 years? Then, now under Maya for a few more years. So that implied it was probably later into the blip. So the wiki placed it in 2021, but we're going to see, I think that was a very good guess by the wiki. All right, so we get a flashback to Maya at her father's grave, all alone. That's pretty sad. So we see the pain that Maya's going through, and I love this when she just launches the motorcycle at the cop car. That's pretty crazy. And of course, ends up having to get bailed out by none other than the Kingpin. So chronologically, the end of Daredevil Season 3 is in late 2017. And I'm going to go over a video soon through all of the Defender series and really covering all of that. So look for that next. But for the sake of this Echo breakdown, Kingpin at the end of Season 3 was, of course, put in jail, threatened by Daredevil. And then now here we are in 2021, just 4 years later. He's out. He's regrouped. He's building his forces again. In fact, the police, some of them were even saying, hey, don't you know who that is? So some of them are even scared of him already. Or probably still remember him, obviously. But I would love to know more about that gap. We're down to 4 years. We just have 4 missing years. But man, are those a big 4 years. So hopefully Daredevil Board again is going to fill it in for us. But, so Kingpin says, my father was killed also when I was 12 years old. He's leaving a few facts out there, but trying to empathize with her because, he lost his dad just as she lost hers. Of course, Kingpin put the hit out on her dad, but yeah, he's leaving that out too. The dude's manipulative, let's face it. Then Maya begins training under the Kingpin. So we know that it's her first assignment because his henchmen are saying, took me years to get my first assignment. And in that assignment, she ends up running face-to-face with Daredevil himself, which is fascinating because I had kind of assumed Daredevil had blipped, that with him being gone during those 5 years, that allowed the Kingpin to rebuild without a threat. No, instead we find out not only is Daredevil not blipped, but he says, I've been watching them all night. So he's been keeping an eye on the Kingpin's men. He strikes an awesome pose with the billy club. Love that. And then says, and then you guys show up. So he's not happy. So yeah, I really, really want to know more now about those 4 years. So again, Daredevil Season 3 ended in the end of 2017. Now here we are in probably mid-2021. Those are some really important 4 years that I hope Daredevil Born Again fills us in on. But we get a really nice fight scene, very cool. Never long enough, right? You could never get enough Daredevil, but it was really good. So while she, you know, basically loses to Daredevil, still Kingpin is very proud of her because, hey, he did better than most of the other men, and says, I've dedicated all my resources into bringing your father's killer to justice. Yeah, that's not necessarily the truth either. But nonetheless, the dude is manipulative. I mean, he is absolutely manipulative. It is a toxic relationship between those two, clearly. Then finally, we get a year. So remember, I said earlier, the wiki did a good job guessing 2021. Well, I think this confirms it. So this was probably a little bit after William Lopez's death. So we don't know for sure, but I'm guessing that the wiki is correct that William Lopez died in 2021. And then the Kingpin says, hey, we'll still have our Sunday dinners, but your tutelage has come to an end. And then, boy, though, talk about dark. This interpreter back on the right, obviously, if you've watched it, you know, this is her last scene for good. Crazy. That was so dark of him to have her killed so casually. And in fact, it shows Echo was okay with this. I mean, he has completely brought her under his wing to the point where she doesn't even care about this poor interpreter getting killed simply because the interpreter might have learned some of the information of his empire through the interpretations. Oh, crazy. But yes, her tutelage has come to an end, so now she is in charge, basically, of William Lopez's operation. So then we jump to Hawkeye, which is in December of 2024. And I said in charge of William Lopez's operation because obviously he's dead, right? So she's taken over now fully. And we see more scenes of, you know, some of the battles, tracksuits there on the far left, and Kazi. By the way, Kazi, so in my state of villainy, I kept wondering, is Kazi alive or not? I mean, it sure looked like he died, but she lowered him off scene. We didn't see him physically die. But my theory was, if he doesn't show up in Echo, then he's dead because she's not happy with him. She would make sure he's dead. So the fact he didn't show up, I'm now convinced he died. He had to have died. Then, of course, we get Hawkeye trying to tell her, look, your boss wanted your father dead. So that's when she realizes it was, of course, Kingpin that put the hit on her dad, and she shoots Kingpin. We'll obviously learn that he's not dead, no big surprise, right? But more importantly, that he's not even blinded. She must have just grazed the side of his head, but we'll talk more about that when we get in a little deeper. So then this is what I thought was really cool. They're very clear that we now jump 5 months later. So if Hawkeye is December 2024, we're now in May or maybe into June of 2025. And they really do help solidify this in many ways. So first of all, Maya has been gone for the last 20 years. They say that multiple times throughout. You look the same after 20 years. You haven't seen her any more than I have in the last 20 years. 20 years is way too long. So they're making it really clear. She's been gone for 20 years. Well, if this is 2025, 20 years ago would be 2005, which would mean those flashbacks when she was a little girl are 2 years before the ones in Hawkeye. Well, I don't think so. That doesn't seem to make sense. She seemed the same age, and you know how people are. We just round up. It's funny how every one of these people are rounding up. But yeah, I think this does not advance us 20 years from 2007. There were some theories that this was going to be in 2027. No, it is most definitely in 2025, and we'll see more why it has to be then as we get in a little deeper. But it's also possible that those earlier flashbacks where she was shadow pupping, remember, in the tent, maybe those were 2006, making it closer to 20 years. So I'll be very interested when the timeline book comes out to see what they do with her flashbacks. But nonetheless, we are in May to June of 2025. Now, we know it's a May-June timeframe because they give us some good hints. And thank you to Drew with the Marvel Cinematic Universe Wiki. Best wiki ever, for pointing this out. Live music, notice in the lower left-hand corner, Fridays, kicks off in May and continues all summer long. We also see kids at the roller rink wearing Tamaha summer camp. Tamaha ends up being the city we'll see that they're in. So since school is out by this time frame of a May, early June, then there's another reason to think that they're at summer camp going to the roller arena. Again, I mentioned that it's Tamaha, and in particular here, they're telling us, welcome to Oklahoma, the city of Tamaha, and we even see the Haskell County Fairgrounds is where a big powwow is occurring. And I looked it up, and sure enough, Haskell County is the county where Tamaha is located. So they did a real good job of letting us know where this physically is. So we Googled to try to figure out, when do these powwows happen, to see if that helped us with this May-June timeframe. The internet was not helpful, but the best we could find was they're pretty much all year long. So great. That means that it doesn't really matter. Doesn't give us any indication of the timing because they happen throughout the year. So again, May to June is working perfect. And then here's why it's got to be 2025. I was so hopeful that they would put Echo not at the end of the timeline, but back in 2025, because in real life, the New York City's mayor race is in November of 2025. And they're talking about that obviously in the post-credit scene, which I will come back to that at the end with a little bit more. But also, this is really important, because the reporter even says there's no doubt it is late in the process. So that makes it even more realistic that we're talking May, June, because the Kingpin is considering jumping into the race. I'm kind of curious if he'll run as a Republican or a Democrat. My guess is as an independent, because it's too late to try to run under a party banner. The parties have already picked their folks, probably. And plus, they may not want the Kingpin in their party. But he would be awesome as an independent. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, everything fits so perfectly with the May, June of 2025. So sure enough, the Disney Plus timeline places Echo right after Wakanda Forever and before She-Hulk. And now I love the fact that I can pull in these dates with no controversy, because everything here has been confirmed by the timeline book. Yay! So sure enough, we can see that it is 5 months after December 2024 when Hawkeye came out. I love it. This might be one of the most impressive jobs Marvel has done at placing something in the timeline. It works with the clues they give us, but it also fits and makes sense, because if the Kingpin's going to run for mayor, this is right where it should go. So my guess is Daredevil Born Again will start before the mayor's race, so kind of pick up after Echo, and will end maybe all the way into 2026, because supposedly it's 18 episodes. It's a long period of time. So very, very cool. Love it, love it, love it. All right, so let's just talk then a little bit about some of the things, the high points from the series. So it picks up again 5 months after Hawkeye. And clearly she has been in a war with Kingpin's men, because she has a nasty injury, which I'm not going to show. Boy, was that. And she gave herself stitches with dental floss. Ouch, my gosh. And then I love, though, that they bring her to the mortician to help her, because the mortician either fixes you up or finishes you off, one of the two. That was funny. Then she talks about the fact that she wants to take over Kingpin's empire. Kingpin had his turn, his run, and it's time for a queen. I'm kind of glad that ultimately, as her character grew throughout this series, she decided that isn't what she wanted to do. And I'm very interested to see what she does next after this series. But at this point, at least, she really, really wants to take over. And then, this is interesting. Clearly, everyone assumed Kingpin was dead. He kind of pulled a Fury and went off the grid to get healed up. Because notice he has information on the King Killer, and there's a bounty on Echo for killing him. So very, very wild. Then, of course, we learn at the end of the first episode, no surprise, the Kingpin and his demise was indeed greatly exaggerated, because he is still alive. Now, at this point, you couldn't really tell, is he going to be blind or what? Because he's got the eye patch on. But we'll see a little later what ended up happening. All right, so Maya now continues her attack on the Kingpin's men. I thought this train scene was incredible in the second episode. Oh my gosh, swinging down. And of course, this is at the end of the train scene where she jumps off the train onto the truck. Oh my goodness, the visuals were so cool. But I did like the fact she wasn't superhuman, because back to when she swung in, notice she barely hung on. She almost fell off the train. That was really cool. But I do like then when she later pulls off a jump over some of the train cars, she just turns around with that little smile on her face. That's great. Love the look of satisfaction. And then when she gets her leg trapped, remember, that's when she gets her power up. So it seems that in times of desperate need, the powers come forward. Now, if I were her at this point, I would be like, hey, why didn't you send me these powers when my dad was dying? So that's interesting. It seems to imply then that the ancestors didn't feel like she needed to heal her dad, or her mom for that matter. They didn't get, but she was a little girl at that point with her mom. But yeah, it's just very interesting she did not get them at that point. So I wonder if they'll ever go more into that, of the ancestors realized this is when you needed them the most. Anyway, pretty cool. So what she leaves on the train is a makeshift bomb, which I think this thing is so wild looking. And in fact, notice the the red and the yellow mixing, that reminded me so much of Die Hard 3, if you've ever seen that one with Sam Jackson, because the whole thing dealt so much with these makeshift bombs that mixed the chemicals and blew up. And boy, does it blow up. I mean, wow, massive explosion. So basically, yeah, she is making it clear, I want to take over the Kingpin's empire. So she's then warned by Henry, we need to talk now. They hit me back, or they hit me, I hit back, and she's referring to them shooting her in the side, I'm sure, which was the dental floss stitches. They'll know this was you. You can't take on the Fifth Army alone. Well, they can't do much with their armory melted. So yeah, she really took out their armory. And she did it not even caring if innocents were inside that factory. Now you would think, or inside the armory rather, you would think anybody working for Kingpin ain't innocent, but still, it just shows how she has no problem taking life. So wild. Kingpin has definitely turned her into his student, or now the master, if you will. So Maya basically says, hey, there's already a war. But the problem is she's brought that war home. And that's what's scaring everyone. And of course, it leads to an epic showdown in the roller rink we saw earlier, which not only is a roller rink, but it has a cool laser tag set up. So that was really a fun place to have a battle. We see the scene from the trailers, the Make America Skate Again, where they come flying through that as she's pounding on people. I love when she throws the dude backwards onto the pinball machine. That was a nice move. And then pulls off the guns from the shoot 'em up game and whips people with them. Really, really cool fight. But it doesn't end well. Looks like they're about to get killed. And then I love this. New York Minute by Don Henley playing. So you know who's calling, right? That's the Kingpin. That's the only reason they're saved at the last minute. So that was pretty cool. And of course, he comes out of hiding so that Echo knows he's actually alive. I didn't kill him. So I love this. This is really interesting. Talk about using tech in a creative way. I wonder how long it'll be before something like this actually exists. Body scans him and then lets him basically sign. And as he says, I thought it was important that we would communicate with no go-between. So at first I thought, wow, that's so neat of him that he would make that tech for Echo. That shows how much he cares about her, even though she shot him. Then you realize, as they say later, as Echo says later, you didn't even want to learn sign language. You just created this so you didn't have to. So you only sort of care about me. Very interesting. But nonetheless, this tech needs to be created since we have VR headsets and stuff. So yeah, very, very cool. All right. So Kingpin literally says, hey, you want an empire, you'll have it. So he's basically willing to give his empire over as long as she'll come back with him. And notice, now is when it gets revealed, yeah, she didn't seem to shoot him in the eye. Now, maybe he ducked, maybe she missed, maybe she intentionally missed. I mean, she hurt him pretty bad. She clearly hit the side of his head, but apparently did not shoot out his eye. Or it's an artificial eye. I guess we don't know for sure yet. So then we get this big-time tie back to the Daredevil series when, in an act of desperation to get her to come back, he's willing to literally let her, quote unquote, free herself in the same way he freed himself. He, of course, killed his dad, and he then says, you can kill me with this hammer. So, wow, if there was any doubt that everything ties back into the first Daredevil series, this was all we needed to know. Other than the fact that it wasn't the same hammer. Now, I don't understand what happened here. I am really curious. Let me know in the comments what you think is going on. I mean, a couple of different options. Could have been a mistake. They picked a different hammer. But that seems unlikely because everybody knows it was a real hammer, not a ball peen hammer. It could be that they're maybe subtly hinting, hey, we are changing things from the original series. But I sincerely doubt that because they put the series in the Disney Plus timeline. And so if they then play the game of, well, but it's not all canon, I'll be irritated, and I suspect many in fandom will. So I don't think that was it either. I would imagine that he's a smart cookie and had that hammer destroyed the moment he realized it was still around, and then now just picked another hammer for symbolism. But let me know what you think. What's going on here, and why is it a different hammer? Anyway, speaking though of Easter eggs, back to other series, we have the hammer, obviously. Then I thought this was cool. We have the reminder that, hey, if you're deaf, you don't need an audio alarm. You want a visual alarm. So that was really cool. And of course, we saw that in the Hawkeye series. And then we get this little callback to Madripoor with our two favorite very, very white Americans. But anyway, Madripoor, of course, is an Easter egg back to Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which is one of the places they went during that series. And of course, it ties back to the X-Men because that's a very popular place for Wolverine in particular to have gone. And then Echo joins the list of Roxxon appearances. Man, Roxxon is everywhere. I'm really happy to see them back again. Here's just a small example of the places that Roxxon has showed up. It was also in Loki. Yeah, Roxxon is everywhere. We really, really need some evil exec from Roxxon to show up. But certainly they have made it clear Roxxon is very, very involved in the MCU. Although it does make you wonder, Cloak and Dagger. Roxxon was big in Cloak and Dagger. And I don't think this pulls in Cloak and Dagger into continuity by any means because it was just an Easter egg. But still, that is interesting. Big tie there with Cloak and Dagger. All right. So, again, Kingpin wants to be freed from his pain. So he hands her the hammer to say, free yourself. Of course, she chooses not to, which is good. But in a way, what she did is she freed herself from Kingpin because she didn't want to kill him. I think that's fascinating. He's saying free yourself. Well, she did. She freed himself from his control. That's what she did. So he says, you and I, Maya, we've come full circle, but not really. No, she has escaped the circle, if you will. So he then, says, come and meet me on the plane. I'll take you back home. And of course, there on the plane, she doesn't come. Now, I'm curious, what is this thing in his eye? What do you think this is? Is this, I don't know. Is it letting him see through the patch? Did it have something to do with the signing? The device he had for signing. I mean, notice this is electronic gears spinning, beeping. That's the closed credits or closed captioning. So I don't know. Let me know in the comments. What do you think this thing was? Very interesting. But yeah, we do see again that he was just badly injured. You can see maybe his skull was even split a little bit, but that he's still alive. But anyway, most important thing is Maya doesn't show up on the plane. Maya decides, nope, I'm not coming. I'm done with you. And of course, he goes into his epic fit of rage, excellent Vincent D'Onofrio rage that we've come to expect from Kingpin. So then he shows back up with her again for one last showdown. And I don't know. I'm wondering if he might have been willing to kill her in this scene. I think so. I think he would have been willing to take her down for good. But she didn't come alone. So I'm assuming no one else could see them standing there. That's more of just in her mind. But it was still cool to have all the different ancestors there as she also, not only does she use her powers from her ancestors, she gives them over to Bonnie and to her grandmother because they're part of the direct lineage. So that's kind of wild. So I don't think she could give her powers to just anyone. But it was kind of weird to see her grandma kicking butt. Kind of reminded me of the family in Blue Beetle. Remember in Blue Beetle, the grandma kicked butt, if you saw that movie. So anyway, she fights off all Kingpin's men, and then she tries to heal Kingpin himself. It was a very interesting scene. It was a flashback to him and the pain he was feeling as his mother was being beaten. And of course, you could see the hammer there in his left hand, and she's trying to say, give me over the hammer. Give me over the hammer. Let it go. Let the pain go. Then it's unclear whether it worked. Because when he comes out of it, he says, what did you do to me? And he's furious. But he leaves. So he lets her leave, or she lets him leave. And obviously he just wants out. I'll be very curious to see if this changed him at all. Did it release some of his pain? Did it make it easier for him to understand his pain? Because obviously that pain with his dad is what's driven him to be who he is. Driven him to his fits of rage, but also his fits or his desire to be excellent and to clean up New York, etc. So it kind of is the whole basis of him. So what did she do? Very interesting. Let me know in the comments what you think. Did she cure him of that rage? Did she make it worse? Who knows? So then I mentioned this a little bit earlier in the video, but we really get the big tease to the next phase of the street level saga in this final scene. So first he says, I want a meeting with all the remaining heads. We need to stabilize the situation before it spirals out of control. Of course, he's referring to the fact that he was out of commission for 5 months, right? They all thought he was dead. So that led to probably some type of a civil war between some of his men. Obviously, Maya got involved in it. And so we know that's going on. He's going to try to centralize his power again. And then we learn the New York City race for mayor is going on, right? And that there's no clear front runner. So if they couldn't have made it more clear, Kingpin is your man, right? Turns out most voters want somebody who is a fighter. Exactly right. A bare knuckle brawler would do well in this race. There's still, and as I said earlier, there's no doubt that it's late in the process, but there's still a window of opportunity. The poll, that's what the poll is telling us. It could be anybody's race. So there's been rumors the Kingpin is going to run for mayor. This pretty much confirms it. And so all of that is leading into the street level saga and the political saga, which I think may ultimately even tie together. So on the street level saga, we've had Hawkeye and Echo. Next, we're going to have Daredevil Born Again. And I think that one we're going to see Fisk running for mayor, probably winning and doing an anti-vigilante type campaign, which will bring Daredevil into his crosshairs, Echo, and ultimately, I think, Spider-Man. Now, there's been rumors that Sony wants to do more of a multiversal story, pull in some of their universe. I hope they do that eventually. I'd rather not see it in Spider-Man 4. I would love to see the culmination of this storyline. Let's see the Kingpin hiring a bunch of villains to go after Spider-Man. Maybe we get our Sinister Six. Who knows? There's so many possibilities where that row on the top could go. Then the bottom row is more the political saga, but I think they may tie in. So we got Falcon and Winter Soldier, Wakanda Forever, and Secret Invasion leading into Captain America, Brave New World, and Thunderbolts. But if it's true that Ross, a.k.a. Red Hulk, as we're guessing, becomes the president, then you've got Kingpin as mayor of New York, Ross as president of the United States. We know that Kingpin and Val are working together, and of course, Val is running the Thunderbolts. And maybe this is where we get Sharon Carter coming back into play. So, yeah, a lot of interesting things going on. I'm very, very excited to see where things go from here with all of this. So, let me know what your favorite is on here and what you're looking the most forward to. So, one last thing, of course, is we got to place Echo in the timeline. And unfortunately, it's right after Wakanda Forever. So, I got to move this stuff over. And by the way, this was way more painful than I'm making it look here. This took forever. But darn that She-Hulk with so many connections. Look at that, 6 things going into She-Hulk. Anyway, so now we can fit in Echo, which is May to June of 2025. And then, of course, we know there is a connection from Hawkeye, obviously, because it's Echo and Kingpin's next appearance. So I do have on my Google Drive this entire timeline. And you can download that if you want. I will leave a pinned comment so you can get to this if you want to get to this entire visual. And then next up is going to be an updated Defenders timeline, including merging finally the Defenders shows in with the main MCU timeline. Should be really cool. Look for that one before long. Don't forget we have the January contest. Be a subscriber, leave a comment. You might win a book or a steel book. Of course, have the membership option that I mentioned earlier. And we have the Discord. So on the Discord, we have a What If Pitches contest number 2, where you can throw in your entries for What If and what you think would. In fact, maybe you can throw in What Ifs about the Defenders series now, right? There's so much more possibility for this What If contest. Also, we're doing a February icon contest, taking me and my son and I guess putting us in some type of Valentine's gear. Oh, my word. That should be fun, as well as other celebrations around Madam Web coming out. And then all year long is our rewatch of the Defenders series. We're on Iron Fist now. It's already started. And then, of course, we'll go all the way to the end, all the way up to She-Hulk Season 1. So I will leave a pinned comment that also has the invite to the Discord. Love to have you join us. Also, if you don't mind, like this video, subscribe if you haven't already. You can check out more content, and we'll all continue to enjoy the ever-growing, ever-changing Marvel Cinematic Universe.